Gola. Oh shit.
I didn't hear that.
We'll be starting
I
the
didn't hear that.
we will be starting the live stream in approximately 10 minutes, and the yes, and so beware. Don't say anything you don't want broadcast at this point, because we are up on the internet and we will be officially starting in 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, hi, Eugene. So how long it's been raining in summer lately?
Oh, raining every day. Yesterday it was a bit better because I was able to do some gardening outside yesterday. But then I thought it was stopped raining, and the bloody rain started pouring again today.
It's happening.
I know. I'm trying to give you guys some smile from the background. See my papayas? I can just reach outside and get my papayas. And then this is my front. This is my front yard. Yes, right here. Look. Oh, look. I can even get you some flowers. Look at my flowers right outside. This is one of the most beautiful flower you can find on the island. Ah, gardenias. Yeah, I had to put it on the right side because I'm married. Otherwise, my wife sees me on the thing and say, "Why you want to be single? Because you had it on the left." So you see, I have my office outside of my balcony. I have my block, and then my room.
It's a natural one.
I had to make sure that that I have battery. I think I'm comfortable now.
C'est la première fois qu'un sommet de ce genre est bloqué de cette manière. C'est une mobilisation historique et on prend date. On sera là à chaque fois qu'ils se réuniront. Ici et maintenant, ici et maintenant,
changer les choses, on peut plus continuer comme ça.
Our fight against climate change is a battle over power. But not only the kind of power that runs our cars or keeps our buildings warm. We need to take back the power that the fossil fuel industry has over society. Fossil fuel companies are the wealthiest and most powerful corporations on the planet, and their core business model threatens all of us. For decades, they have corrupted our governments, ravaged our planet, and treated the atmosphere like an open sewer, while the impacts of climate change devastate the people who've done the least to cause the problem. We believe in a sustainable and prosperous future, which is socially just and economically fair. Our mission is to inspire, train, and mobilise people to bring power back to citizens and create a thriving global movement. To put the heat on the fossil fuel industry, drive our leaders to act, and create the climate solutions the world needs. We will confront the power of the fossil fuel industry, dismantling their social licence and stopping their projects on the ground. We will also continue to work locally with communities affected, supporting those responding to climate disasters and working to promote investment towards community-based sustainable initiatives and renewable energy projects. We will keep targeting and pressuring local and national governments to take action on reducing emissions. But we need everybody. No matter where you live, there are ways to plug in. Whether it's joining our campaigns online, organising for climate action in your community, or joining a mass mobilisation to move beyond fossil fuels and to a clean energy future. There's room for everyone in this growing movement. Together, we can create a new kind of power. Join us. There's room for everyone in this growing movement. Together, we can create a new kind of power.
The Paris Agreement is adopted.
Weather, drought, floods, those are things that we can't turn our back on.
There is a complete absence of a plan to get us to 1.5.
It requires all countries to cut their greenhouse gas emissions by the
Just a
second half of
technical
this
question,
century.
please.
When I say indigenous, you say right.
Hello?
I'm listening. No technical question.
I'm talking about the technical team in USA. Mayday, Houston, I have a problem.
100% renewable energy.
All eyes are on us.
Okay, can I ask a technical question? Anyone from the tech team is online? Okay, so if I have, just in case that I ran out, okay, can I ask a technical question? Anyone from the tech ISP? I had two ISPs on my phone, and then I have both have data. Just in case I ran out of the other one, don't worry, I will switch to the other one and I'll just join, right? I had two ISPs.
I don't know exactly. I'm not sure.
Don't worry, I will switch to the other one and I'll just join, right? Okay.
Mikhail, do you want to
Yes,
ask that
technical
question
team. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, technical team?
Yeah.
All right. So in case I get disconnected from one service provider, I can just switch on my phone to the other provider, and then I can just join you. So don't worry about it, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
I can just click join again, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Super.
Yeah. It's an experiment.
Espresso.
Experiment in knowledge mobilization. and community engagement.
Okay.
Pleased to meet both of you.
Just give me a thumbs up when we have to look serious.
Yeah, yeah.
Just sitting here like, okay, what's happening right now? So I'm going to put this out.
Yeah, as ready as I can be.
Oh, Selwyn is gone.
Oh, did he go away from his Skype? Or?
No, he just went off screen.
Sure.
Can we give it 2 minutes?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's happening with the in-person audience, whether or not we've gotten.
You can start late if you'd like. You want to stay? We'll be starting in
5 minutes.
A couple minutes while the
Sure.
audience gets in. So.
Okay, folks, we will be starting in just a few minutes while we work out some of the actual human beings who are going to be joining us and work out where they're going to be sitting and whatnot. So thank you for your patience. And you can join us online at #PacificStream. And I understand you can do that on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the social media stuff. It's #PacificStream. And do you have everything sorted out with the human beings out there? Maybe just ask them if they're going to participate, come in, and
This is important.
yeah. I'm pretty much ready anytime if, you know. Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
I think so.
You're live.
All right. Welcome.
This is not Judgment Day.
So first of all, just a disclaimer for everyone joining us on the internet and live and at the University of Victoria. There is a variety of different technologies that are being deployed here. So if there's any technical difficulties, please just bear with us and have patience. But I want to thank all of you for joining us. It's difficult to say where you're joining us because we're all spread out throughout different parts of planet Ocean, throughout the Pacific and other parts of North America and beyond, I imagine. Here at the University of Victoria, where Eugene and others here are joining us, we want to acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples upon whose traditional territory we are gathered. I've had the benefit of meeting many of the elders, and one of the elders in particular who often opens up gatherings, she always reminds us that we have all these differences and there's enough strife going on in the world, but if we come together in one heart, and in the Coast Salish language they talk about natsumat, working together, then we can perhaps make some progress towards our mutual interests. So thank you all for joining us. My name's Eli Enns, and I'm Tlaoquiit from the west coast of Vancouver Island, is one of 14 Nuu-chah-nulth nations on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And I'm also a board member of the Pacific Peoples Partnership and the Regional Coordinator North America for the ICCA Consortium. And through these various capacities, I work with communities, including my own communities, but communities throughout the Pacific and other parts of North America in forwarding climate action, biodiversity conservation, and reconciliation and peace-building activities. So I'm very glad to be moderating this panel of diverse folks from throughout the Pacific. And with that, I'd like to pass the metaphorical feather over to my left, to Eugene, to introduce yourself and share a few opening thoughts for us.
Mm-hmm. Good afternoon. My name is Eugene Lee. I'm originally from North Borneo, so I was born on the island of Borneo in the city-state of Brunei. My ancestors come from the Malaysian side, what is now the Malaysian side, so indigenous to the area. We would be, I guess, labeled Sinos, so part of my heritage and culture would be from China from way back, but since then we've mixed with the indigenous locals, so my bloodline stretches in that area. I'm very honored to be here to share this panel with our esteemed guests from, well, now in Baltimore and in Samoa and Tokelau, and of course here in UVic. And it is amazing to have a panel like this to be talking about the narrative of what's going on in the islands in around the South Pacific, and also within the climate change and climate panel discussions. So I'm really excited to go with that.
Thank you. Now over to
Selwyn?
Our other left.
Yeah.
Please introduce yourself and share whatever opening thoughts you might have.
Vanuatu.
Oh. Hi, my name is Selwyn. Selwyn, so I am from Vanuatu, and currently I'm living in Baltimore. I'm going to University of Baltimore studying global affairs and human security. And my interest is within human security within the Pacific region. So most of my research topic is on resource scarcity, aid effectiveness, climate change adaptations and mitigation programs, and policies in the Pacific. So those are the things that I'm interested in, and I'm very happy to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mikaele Mayava, and I'm from the islands of Tokelau.
I think
we're currently frozen.
Currently, right, he's I used to work for the United Nations.
Okay,
can you hear me?
You cut out just for a minute, but if you could introduce yourself again, that would be very helpful.
Mikaele Mayava, I was born and raised in Tokelau. At the moment, I live in Samoa. And we are part of the movement in the Pacific called the Pacific Climate Warriors, where we gathered our youth and empower our youth and people on the islands to adapt and mitigate to climate change. So I'm very happy to be on this panel.
Fantastic. So thank you for that, for those opening thoughts. Just to situate the conversation a little bit more, in the 1993-1994, the international community came together, and there was a collective acknowledgement of climate change. And the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change was ratified by countries from all over the world, which recognized the changing climate that was at least in part attributable to industrial economic activities of human beings. And so every country who has signed on to the UN Framework Convention has certain responsibilities under that agreement to forward various initiatives in climate change adaptation and mitigation. However, what many of us from various indigenous communities know and live with every day is that the impacts of climate change are affecting indigenous peoples and marginalized communities, in particularly in coastal areas. the fact that climate change is affecting us most in the places where we live doesn't mean that we are the victims of climate change. What it often means is that we become the most innovative solution makers. And so my understanding of the dialogue here today is that we are acknowledging that Indigenous peoples from throughout the South Pacific, as well as the west coast of Vancouver Island, yes, we are experiencing the impacts of climate change, but that doesn't mean we're going to be passive victims in those scenarios. Utilizing the teachings of our ancestors, utilizing various new technologies that are available to us today. It's our peoples who are adapting to climate change because we have to in order to survive. So that's the feeling that I get from when people talk about the Pacific movement. It's not about letting the world know that we need your charity. It's letting the world know that we're taking action, and we ask you to join us and being bold. My closing comments on that is just to share a little bit about this necklace that I'm wearing. I was at the World Parks Congress, the IUCN World Parks Congress in Sydney, Australia in 2014. And it was on that occasion that the Prime Minister of the Cook Islands took the opportunity to announce a major expansion of a marine protected area. And the aunties from that community came around all of us who were sitting in a circle, and they adorned us with these necklaces. And the message that they gave to us was to wear these necklaces and share the story of what's going on in the South Pacific. Just as you say, not about a charity case or to say that we are the passive victims of climate change, but to say that we are innovators. So, I acknowledge the efforts of the Cook Islands to expand marine protected areas, but it behooves all of us to play a role in moving those kinds of initiatives forward. So. I would like to ask the panel, in the places where you're connected, what kinds of things are you doing to take the leadership role in adapting and mitigating the impacts of climate change? Anyone? Just yes, brother.
Yeah, with respect, Vanuatu and colleagues, I'd like to share from Samoa. First of all, I just want to say that yes, we don't need charity, but in the same time, we want the world to take responsibility. The big polluters in the world take responsibility in a way that they need to support the Pacific. So when you're talking about adaptation and mitigation, yes, we have been doing that since I've learned about climate change and the impact of climate change. In Tokelau, we are the first nation to actually come up with a solution with the help of the New Zealand government to have our electricity 100% dependent on renewable energy. And we've done, this is going on to the three years now. And now Samoa is also going on the same path for 2017 to going 100% renewable energy for the electricity needs. So from small islands, even though we are most impacted by climate change, the impact of climate change, we are actually taking leadership. Leaderships of the consequences of the big polluters. So when you're talking about charity, we don't really want people to feel sorry for us and say, but we want them to learn from us. We want them to learn from the positive attitude that we have towards taking care of Mother Earth and our environment. Because really, in reality, you know, the rich people, they think they can live on money if they don't have a land to live on. That's wrong. People, the indigenous communities has been living on their land, feeding off the land and the oceans for many, many years, for centuries and centuries. Yes, we like to develop. Yes, we like to be modernized and look at the ways we need to improve our lives. But we don't want to go into the extent of destroying our food, the land that is providing us food. That is wrong. So, and right now, the youth of talking now, you're talking about 1,400 population, and it's a country. You're talking about them building gardens, keyhole gardens for each families, for about 300 families, so that each one of them can have a sustainable living of vegetables, because our soil is being ruined by the salt water. It's because of rising sea level. So empowering them and getting ideas. This is a methodology. This is the idea we learned from the internet from Africa, and now it's implementing in Texas. It's because it's using less water, and also because it's built up above ground. So we even in our small island, we see the impact. We see waves come through our houses, and I am sure that the richest man in the world wouldn't want the seawater coming through his house. So why do you think that your money is most important than our atom? Why do you think that your development of the future is more important than us just having a life, just having a simple life, just to live? I think that is what we are striving here. This is what gives us the passion as climate warriors of the Pacific to continue. Just in 2011, a few years ago, we carved traditional canoe to go to Australia, to go and block the coal ship in Newcastle port. You're talking about massive ships, to 5.
Oh, we're losing you.
Traditional canoe, we are crazy things. Yes, we are crazy because we love our land, and our land is our identity. So we wanted to send a message to Australia as our neighbor that their coal companies and their coal business is destroying the people that really supports them also. I will stop here and give opportunity to my colleagues, but that's what we are doing. If you look at outside of our house, colorful. Look at the papaya plantation, look at the papayas, look at all those trees out there. We plant them to mitigate climate change, so that the trees you are cutting, we are planting here in the Pacific. I leave the chance now to my colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. You can feel the passion. And also, thank you for sharing those examples of the leadership that your community is taking your nation. Maybe turn to our brother in Baltimore. The question being, what kinds of steps is your community taking to not just be a passive victim of climate change, but to be a leader in adapting and mitigating the impacts?
Thank you. I'll just add on to what my friend from Samoa is talking about. I think it's about the attitudes of the people that matters more. Why, even though we are the ones that are mostly affected by the impact of climate change. People never stop. People never stop the attitude. People never stop giving up. They keep doing what they're doing. Even like I'll give you an example. If there's a cyclone coming, you have all your gardens, then it destroys all the gardens. People don't stop. You don't freeze there. People replant them. Then the next season comes, they keep doing it. It destroys next cyclone comes, it destroys the gardens. They keep doing it again. So even though, it's like they're on a surviving mode where you have to do this all the time in order to survive. So they never give up. So that's the attitude that we have, and I'll put that into perspective. So, for example, if the value of it is estimated that the impact of Cyclone Bam 2 years ago in my country was around some $450 million, and people never stop at the Bam. They keep people trying to recover and build on their life. Then just a month ago, there was another cyclone coming. Then 7 days ago, there's another one. Cyclone Donna just burst in our country. So those are the, so you imagine that amount of money and how it impacts the people. But people never give up in planning and to keep doing what they're doing in order to sustain their life. So like other Pacific countries, we are on a survival mode where we never give up. We keep doing what we're doing because we know that's how we're surviving. Thank you.
Thank you. Eugene.
I think the narrative has changed quite a bit in terms of what Mikhail and Selwyn has been talking about, and continuing that. We're also looking at change in culture as well. So we're looking at the art, the music, and the role that it plays with what's going on in that area. I know in Borneo, it's really hard for us as Indigenous people to really talk about what's going on with climate change and how it affects us, because first of all, the Indigenous portion, the population is trying to be recognized, first of all. And that's a battle in itself. But then the music and the culture is also represented in that. And so I think that's a very important part to talk about too in this conversation, where culture is so important, whether it be music or art or poetry. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in the narratives that's changing, especially with what's going on with climate change, and we're seeing that every so often now, and with a lot of diaspora in different areas, whether it be in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or States, we are seeing the change in the narratives in the music and the art as to what is happening to their homeland.
Yeah, great. Great point on the role of art in knowledge mobilization and getting the information out to people who might not pick up a scientific journal article about the impacts of climate change, but who could resonate with a song, or who could resonate with a painting or another work of art. So yeah, very good insights. Thank you for that. So just a reminder to everybody who's joining in cyberspace, you can engage online through #PacificStream. And I have other thoughts and things that can be said, but if you're starting to get any questions or comments from your social media, just wave at me. Okay, great.
Can I just also add of what Eugene has said about culture? That's very true. You know, in the millennia, in year 2000, the scientists told us for somewhere that we're going to be sink. You know, we're going to sink. And you know what the people did? Only one person ran away. Out of 1,400 people, only one person ran away. And you know what we did? The chief of the village told us to wear something white on the nights that the wave's gonna come, because that's what the scientists said, that's what the impact of climate change. We all wear something white, and we wheelbarrow our elders and our babies and took them to the ocean side. And this is the conversation between us. How high do you think the water is going to be? How high the wave is going to be? Do you think we're gonna struggle? Do you think we're gonna die like this? How are we gonna die? This story I tell every time, because this tells the resilience of the people. This tells you the developed countries who are ruining the world with extracting tar sand from tar sand and from coal and all these things, and they don't want to change their lifestyle. This shows you that we, the people of the islands, we love where we live. We enjoy our life. We enjoy everything that we have, our culture and everything. And only on this land that the culture is pure. only on this land. And if anything is going to happen, we will stay on that land. And we're not telling you like to say, oh, well, no. We want you to take responsibility. Do the right thing as a human being.
Well said. I love that passion. It gets me all fired up too over here. Nothing yet. So one of the things that I would like to share, what all these various conversations are reminding me of is a story that our elders have passed down from the time of a big flood that happened in our part of the world in the Pacific Northwest. And it's a story about a young man who had a reoccurring dream about a plant. And in this plant, in the current context of the society at the time, was deemed to be a useless plant. It had no useful purpose, and it was seen as a weed or whatnot. But in his dream, this young man kept dreaming about this plant, and was provided with inspiration in the dream to learn how to get to know the plant and utilize the plant, for there was a big change that was coming. And this is a very tough plant, very difficult to uproot, and very strong and fibrous. And so eventually, through this reoccurring dream, this young man got the inspiration to fasten this plant into a very strong rope. And he was in his inspiration, he was inspired to take one of the canoes up to a very high place on the mountain and to fasten this canoe to the land through using this plant. And so the way that the story goes is that eventually this dream came true, and there was a large water event in our part of the world, and it was this family that followed this inspiration, which survived and was provided with an opportunity to start over again. The other teaching in this story is about looking to nature, looking to the other organisms, plants, animals, whatnot, that are part of our community. And when we're talking about climate change adaptation, we're talking about transformation, we're talking about what is the role of, what are these plants, what are these animals, what are these birds and fish saying to us about the changing world? So all of our various cultures have stories like this about our relationship to plants and various animals in our ecosystems. So I'd like to maybe use that as an opportunity to expand the dialogue in terms of the value system that's behind the actions that are being taken. We've lost one of our participants online, but perhaps I could pass the feather over to Baltimore through the Skype to, if there's anything you have in terms of the value system that's behind the worldview and adaptation.
Thank you. When it comes to land, to us, land means everything, and land is our identity, and you cannot isolate. We cannot isolate ourselves from. So there's a saying that says in Vanuatu, there's the three L's of life, which means language, lineage, and land, and those are the things that bind us. And once you lose those three L's, you lose the value of everything. So you have to keep those three things bind together: language, land, and your lineage, because we are all connected. Our land connects us to nature. Our lineage connects us with each other. Our language connects us with each other. And you cannot get away from that. That's the bondage that wave us together. So that's, yes. So when it comes to, for example, for us in predicting signs of different weathers, then that's when nature starts talking to you. So like you have on where I come from in Vanuatu, when you find birds start laying their eggs on the ground, then you realize that there's going to be a big cyclone is coming. So we have to prepare. So those are the signs that our elders used to live by. The signs that tell us this is when the birds start laying eggs on the ground, then you realize that no, there's going to be a cyclone coming. So those are some things that tells our connections with nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Language, lineage, and land. Very appropriate insight on this one. And sorry, brother, the internet let us down for a minute there, but I'm not sure if you heard the question. We're kind of circling back on this idea of resiliency and the value system that's behind the commitment of your communities to continue to fight the good fight, so to speak, of climate change adaptation, and what kind of stories and value systems that you lean on in the work that you do.
Sorry, I not.
Yeah, I'll put it another way. What our brother in Baltimore just shared was about the 3 L's that they talk about. This is something that's easy to remember, something that, a story, like the story about this plant in New Chanoth, the use of that plant and realizing that every plant and every animal in our ecosystem has a potentially valuable role. With the 3 L's, I think, is very appropriate to this conversation because you have language, lineage, and land. And that's something that everyone can relate to in a different way. Every human being on Earth is connected to some place. They come from some place. We're all indigenous to planet Earth. Some peoples, like yourself, are still deeply connected to the place where you're from. The language, the lineage, the land. And I think that may be part of what compels you to take responsibility. And the challenge that you made to the so-called developed world earlier this evening was to say, take responsibility. And what I'm suggesting in this line of conversation is that part of getting there, for other people to be able to take responsibility, they need to look internally and look at the places where they're from and get reconnected, because that connection to place is what helps to provide that ethic of taking responsibility.
Yeah, very, very, very right, very correct. And I tell you, with our relationship to the land, when when our mothers give birth to their children, the first thing that comes out of there, or the things that comes out and give to the family, it's a fanua, and this is the placenta, the umbilical cord that comes out, and the uncle or the brother or the members of the family will take it and dig a hole on the ground, and then for us in Tokelau we usually plant a coconut tree. And that's very first day, you become connected to your land through that cultural practice. So it's very difficult. And I know for sure that wherever you're from in the whole world, that without land, you're nothing. Because that's where life comes from also for us. So with our land is threatened by the impact of climate change, that is part of us is threatened. So we are taking responsibility right now to something that is not really much caused by our actions, but by the big companies that is drilling oil and burning oil and all of this. But we're taking responsibility because it is part of us. Our land is part of us. So this is what gives us the passion. This is what gives us the energy, the strength, and the power that our ancestors looked after this land forever, so that we can have a good life.
Thank you. Eugene, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share on the subject of what value system and teachings goes behind that commitment?
Certainly. I mean, with the islands in the Pacific, we truly value land, but also value the ocean. And there's that interconnectedness that we seem to have rediscovered. Back in the day, there was being in the South Pacific, or whether it be in an island community, especially in the Pacific or in the equatorial areas, there was a lot of coastal area that was removed for whether it be resort or whether it be for resource extraction. And from there, a lot of mangroves were taken out. And as we know, mangroves are such an important part of the ecosystem in an equatorial island. And now we're coming back and rediscovering it because we know as indigenous people, it is all interconnected from land to ocean and everything in between. And a mangrove is one of those areas where it is in between, where it's so important, yet we also neglect it. And now a lot of island nations are coming together and we're saying, yes, mangroves are very important. And there's this whole rediscovering of saving the mangrove areas and not necessarily taking it down for resorts or for areas for beaches so that tourists can come in. So that sort of understanding and the resources that have been given to us through the exchange of knowledge has been so important. And I think that has been one of the things that a lot of especially in where I'm from and close to the islands where I'm from, have been very. They've been talking about that and how to save those areas.
Okay, we have a question from, I don't know where it came from, but it may be Facebook or whatnot, or somebody's good mind here. Well, let's have a look at the question. And get ready, hold on to your seats because it's about conflict. Yeah, don't blow a gasket over there, my friend. Sea level rise has literally changed entire coastlines in the Pacific. It's impacted, it's eroded, whatnot. How has land ownership been impacted by the rising seas? Does this cause conflict in communities? Kind of a loaded one. Is there land? I mean, I know here we have various levels of ownership. In Tlaloquid on the west coast of Vancouver Island, we have the bedrock jurisdiction, which is our Hahulfi. In our language, it's the bedrock jurisdiction of our relationship to the land. But then you also have constitutional jurisdictions, federal government, provincial, municipal, and then fee simple land ownership. And of course, as the rising sea levels reshapes our coastlines, that impacts various land ownership. So do you guys have any experience over there with conflict, or is it all puppy dogs and rainbows?
I can share with you what's going on in Tokelau, and the world can learn from us. In Tokelau, yes, the sea level rising has taken a lot of our land. And I give you an example of a land that is right near my house. So what happened is that we see the problem. We see the soil erosion. We see our land is going smaller and smaller. So the elders of the village have made a plan that we will give you this much of cement, and each family in your own time have to adapt, have to build a seawall and plant trees and all of this. So the landowner thinks, yes, we are take responsibility that we are the landowners and we have to do something about it. We're not going to just sit here and go to the court and fight over something that is taken by the sea. So what we're doing, we adapt. Right now in my island of Nukunonu, they are building seawall all around the island and plant more trees on it. So that, because even if you plant trees and don't build the sea will take it. So we just have to keep building and keep adapting and keep mitigate. That's what we do in our island.
Okay, I'm gonna give some. I'm gonna contribute a little to this.
Please do. Yes.
So my example, it's not gonna be for the whole country of Vanuatu, since we are so diverse with a lot, like more than 100 different cultures. So I'll speak specifically to where I am from, because on other parts of the country it's different. So it comes back to the 3 L's I mentioned earlier. So there's this idea that's it's a conflict between ownership and custodians, because sometimes we often misuse those two terms. In indigenous society, it's not ownership, it's you are custodians of the land, because life doesn't freeze when you're dead. There's a next generation that's going to carry on that culture forward. So when it comes to land, when I live by the oceans, my house is literally 10 meters away from the ocean. So we are there, we're just custodian looking there, knowing that the next generations, when we're gone, the next generation will still gonna come. Even though half of the beach might go away, people will still identify. And not only that, we also relate ourselves to our ocean as well. So in our culture, there's part of the process of our culture when people died, you have to do your last washing or swim before you get to heaven. So those are the blessings that we know identifies in all the harbors all around our island. So we know that this belongs to the certain tribe, this belongs to the certain clans. So it's there. People were living there, even though it's shaping it. We know that it's there. So we cannot fight over it, because it's already designated to them. So we are just living there as custodian, taking care of it, knowing that that's what we're doing. Then the next generations will take over from us and keep doing the same thing, looking after that. So it goes back to the land and lineage. So you have land lineage and language. So it goes back to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Eugene, are you aware of any conflicts caused by sea level rise and ownership models?
I wouldn't say there'd be conflict, but I think there's a lot of island states now that have acknowledged what is going on. This being a migration discussion and panel, a lot of countries in island states are preparing themselves. Let's acknowledge it now. I mean, some of the islands are sinking, or as sea level rises, they have to plan and think about the move. We've already seen it with Kiribati, and we're going to be seeing it with the Solomon Islands as well. So some of the islands, they are moving some of their communities to other places. But what's really interesting is a lot of island states are very receiving of these people who are being moved because of the situation. And there are a few things that they have to be aware of, one being culture. There's going to be a difference in cultures, so you have to accept the cultures in a very accepting manner, you know. And we've talked about this between the three of us here on the panel, as well as Dr. Laura Murray, who's with Climate Change Focus, and we talked about the respect, and when you do migrate, what does happen? You know, you have to look at the socioeconomic processes, what's going to happen with health, utilities, and so there's all these variables that have to be looked upon when there's migration. So to diffuse any sort of conflict there may arise when it does happen, and I think the island states they've been preparing for this, and they've been excelling in receiving the people who are moving. And there's also participation from Australia and New Zealand as well, where they are facilitating the discussions and the conversations and where it's going to go about when it does happen. I know in certain areas where I come from, there certainly has been conflict, this being Borneo, because we do have a common law system. Of course, we're part of the Commonwealth, so land ownership is very different from what Selwyn was talking about and what Mikhail was talking about, because now we're talking about ownership and not custodians, being custodials of the land, and we're seeing a loss in that, and there's a lot of indigenous people who are losing that. We've seen that with the Penan people in Borneo, and of course Dr. David Suzuki did a wonderful documentary of that on the nature of things. So we are seeing the loss of land, and unfortunately it is sad. But in terms of South Pacific, I think the conversations have been long going, and it's been really well done. So facilitation has been there, so to reduce the conflict.
Question.
I just had a follow-up question, inspired a little bit by this idea of conflict, and looking now, widening that out to not just between communities, but between nations. We're seeing in recent years this concept of a climate refugee, and I think it came about mostly through good intentions of trying to provide, through journalism, a sort of evocative image of people who might actually lose their lands and their whole nation states. But looking at the current climate of refugees, and unfortunately the amount of hatred that is leveled at this refugee concept, which of course is completely misappropriate, but it is there. Are we, by using this terminology, down the line laying the foundation for conflict between communities? And I'm thinking a little bit here towards Australia, and it's publicizing very damning language about not taking any people from certain countries, but I think it could happen in North America as well.
Do you want to tackle that one? I mean, I've got some thoughts, but...
It looks like Michaela wanted to jump in.
What do you guys think about the use of the word climate change refuge?
We're not climate refugees, we are climate warriors. We are talking about, okay, look at the world at the moment, right? Australia have a problem of refugees. They don't want their people to come in Australia. The USA don't have a problem with refugees. The whole world is having problem with refugees. Why do you think the world can handle climate refugees? We are not refugees. We are climate warriors. We are warriors by descendants. This is what we are doing right now.
Yeah.
Okay? Right now, we are developing our island. We are adapting our island. Climate refugees should come out of your vocabulary and focus on how the world can help and solve this problem. That should be the subject.
Yep.
You are talking about climate refugee. You're already talking about failure. Failure of the developed world, failure of the oil companies to accept responsibility, to do the right thing.
Yes, sir.
So forget talking about climate refugee. talk about solutions. Talk about how America and Trump can actually help this agreement. Talk about what you can do in your country to push your MPs and your government to support what the world has signed in Paris. Talk about those things. Do not talk about climate refugee because we are climate warriors.
Well, I definitely feel your passion, and I definitely hear your sentiment 110%. It might be appropriate. I mean, we're seeing this in campuses across Canada right now. A certain subject matter is brought up, or certain terminology is brought up, and more conversations are being shut down. And I think that there's a time and a place for everything, you know. So if we could for a moment, we'll say, as a starting point, we all agree here today, as a starting point, that the focus should be on solutions, 110%. And part of getting to those solutions is resolving misconceptions that are out there in the world. So one of those misconceptions, and I think the question that was asked got partly answered it for us, but one of those misconceptions is the idea of climate refugees. And yeah, refugees have, it's a very highly charged concept. And I think that partly what the question gets to is something that is really to the heart of the problem in terms of geopolitics. The nation-state system that we live in the world today, which draws lines on natural features of the planet, that's a total artificial construct. It's completely make-believe. And it was dreamt up, you know, through a combination of the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, the so-called Westphalian state system, and it was further driven, and the lines were carved into maps and into people's minds through the expansion of colonial interests, and then eventually, you know, post-World War II, divvying up of the world through geopolitical arrangements that shaped the macroeconomic system, you know. So I see that part of the question is about how our people have moved naturally throughout the world in the past. Like my new Chanoth, my great-grandmother comes from Nia Bay, Washington, which is on the American side of the 49th parallel, you know. So there's all these make-believe boundaries that have been put on to the landscape, and it's changed the way we've interacted as human beings. And as we adapt and continue to change and transform as the world changes, I think the question gets to an important point around, you know, let's perhaps evolve the way we think about these borders. Do you have any thoughts on that one, Eugene?
Yeah, the evolution of the border is a very interesting concept. I mean, traditionally, my paternal and maternal side are indigenous. So my grandmothers and grandfathers are indigenous, and when they moved from their indigenous land to the city-state of Brunei, we've now become stateless. And so very essentially a citizen of nowhere. And we are 5 generations within this land, and yet we are still stateless. So it's a very interesting conversation where we would be refugees in our own land, which does not make sense, but it is how it happened. And it's a conversation that has taken forth in Borneo. And in terms of climate migration and the whole concept of being a refugee, there is a whole, like you said, it's very charged, and there's a negative connotation to it. And I think Selwyn would have a better explanation of that with his global studies at the University of Maryland, and I think he has a very good insight as to the term climate refugee and how it applies to the South Pacific and how it's just not very well liked. I know Mikhail does not like it. If you know that.
I told you to stop saying that.
but just a thought from Selwyn. I think he's got very strong insight in that as well.
Yeah, I personally think it's like you said, it's a loaded term where people are trying. Every time you use it, and people are trying to find their ways how to get out of that, because of the way refugees itself, it's been portrayed across the world, that people feel like it has that connotations attached to it. And once you start saying climate refugees, then you feel like people are leaving because there's something terrible happening. So it makes like he said earlier, it makes people like you feel like you are helpless, like you're hopeless, you cannot do anything. That's why you're living, which is not actually. And the scenario is totally different. People living, when you're talking about refugees, people living for different purposes. But in some terms, then that term always changes. Like sometimes it bugs me when people keep changing when all these migrations, like if we look at migration itself. So once people start moving from one group to the other, then you start having that label comes with it. Some you call them immigrant, some you call them expatriate, some you call them refugees. So you have all this different reasoning attached to them. So once you start putting them, then refugees are the one that having that bad image that is portrayed among them. What about immigrants? What about what about people who are being displaced? What about people? It's just a migration of people. It's just the dates of the difference that makes people start believing that, okay, we have to own this because we are here first, and these people coming in, we have to label them as this. So when you start feeding that into the conversations of climate change refugees, people are not yet leaving those islands. They are just displaced to different places because of the rising sea. So then that language starts floating around, and you start portraying, oh, these people need help. We have to find out how we're going to help them. But then it goes back to basic things. Abide to the treaties, abide to those things, international commitment. And when you don't do this, and you start calling those people, you start calling names to these people without, they're still in their country's displacement. Because, for example, in Kiribati, there are a couple of islands that people cannot live there anymore, so they have to displace them to other parts of the island. They are not even leaving that country yet. Their president said they might leave one day, but then you already have that connotations flowing around that, okay, there's these issues coming up. So I had this when so there was I was introducing myself once in my school, and somebody just stood up, oh, you guys, your islands are drowning. Like I look around and said, really? Do you have to say that to me? Like it's just those things, because people just big bits and pieces from whatever it's presented to them, then that's how they start telling the stories to become they're preconceived by the ideas that all these things are happening without really knowing what actually happening. I'm sorry, I think I'm talking too much.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
So we have another member of the audience who has either a question or a comment.
A question, but first of all, want to follow up on the environmental refugee versus warrior. But first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kenneth Mackay. I've spent quite a few years working in the South Pacific on climate change related to coral reefs, marine turtles, and fish. I haven't been to Tokelau, but I have been to Tarawa in Kiribati, and also Funafuti. And I know what happens on the low atolls when you have a high spring tide, the king tides, and the whole island floods. I guess my question to our Tokelau colleague is, warriors don't always win the battles. One of the problems is the fight that you're fighting is also outside your territory. Because the climate change, as you very clearly said, is not something that you're responsible for. We are. So what happens if the sea level does rise and your seawalls and your trees don't help it? Are you then looking at possible contingency? In Tuvalu, they've tried to negotiate with New Zealand, or are you going to do like happened previously where people got resettled to Fiji when the mining companies destroyed their islands?
I think you've made him mad again.
You know.
Go for it, brother.
Yeah. No, you know, it's if only you can see the eyes and the face of our elders when you ask that question. All you get is a smile. Yeah. I tell you, I totally understand. We totally understand what you guys are talking about. But we are talking about the present. The present take care of the future. If you spend too much time thinking of the future, you'll forget where you are. And this is where we are right now. We live. We are enjoying with prosperity in our islands. We love the culture. We are enjoying our children, our grandchildren. We live in the island. You're talking about the last coconut tree going down. When will that be? But I tell you what we can do. We can predict that right now, and I can tell you I can tell you what we can do right now. We can start acting right now. If today it's too late, that we have to do it. The look on our elders' face whenever I ask this question is just a smile on their face, with peace, with peace, knowing that we are doing everything we can. First, to teach our generation of how to be people. Second, to teach the world of what we can do to help this climate change, but also just to live a good life. Is that hard to do?
Sometimes it is hard to do, but you're right. I think that is it's a really good response, and you know, it reminds me. So I'll answer your question right now. But it just reminds me of the sea level rise on the west coast of Vancouver Island, where combination high tide storm surge was starting to put driftwood up on our people's decks. Our traditional housing was designed to move with us throughout our territory. As we started building modern housing, so-called, with foundations and living in one place throughout all the seasons of the year, we started to see those impacts on our assets, and so, well, we're not prepared to go and live in the past. We are going to continue to adapt to how things are happening today. So what we did, with a lot of chagrin and internal dialogue and conflict, is we actually built a community expansion 14 to 21 meters above sea level. And it was the first time in the history of our nation that we built that high away from the ocean level. It's not the all-encompassing solution, but it certainly, you know, it certainly is part of the adaptation. And similarly to our brothers across the ocean there, we built geothermal systems. We built micro hydro projects. We took the leadership role in terms of reducing our own carbon footprint in the world. And so I think that while we're going to oscillate through the challenges, we're also going to continue to tease out of those examples the positive things. And I think what we're hearing so strongly from the other side of the ocean is that the most important thing is that belief in ourselves and not being defeated mentally, that the creativity of people when they believe in themselves really will surprise us, I think.
And let me just share one more thing as us as Christian. No disrespect to any other. But as us being Christian growing up, we have to believe, and we are taught to believe that there is life after life. That there is a life, an eternal life. And this teaching might help those selfish people that are digging up oil and doing the task. If you are doing the right thing in this life, this is our teaching. If you're doing the right thing in this life, then for sure you will live eternal. And that's what we are doing right now for our islands. And something that you might not understand and say that we are stupid or we are crazy to not have a plan, everybody have a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Question in the back there.
I hope it's working now. Thank you. Well, I really feel the energy in this room, and thank you very much for organizing this. It's such a wonderful conversation. I'm Dennis, and I'm a student here at the University of Victoria. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and you know, the Philippines is also situated in the Pacific Ocean, and every year we have 20 typhoons, and 5 of them are deadly. So while we're talking about climate change here in a global context, the impact of it is local. In November 2013, there was a huge typhoon that entered the Philippines, Typhoon Yolanda, and it killed thousands of people. So climate change for me, I think of it as, you know, apocalyptic. It is really apocalyptic. And I cannot hold my voice. I just wanted to hear, but this conversation is so powerful. Probably I just would like to ask our brothers from the other side of the world, how can we build alliance? How can we build solidarity when there is too much neoliberalism? It is a problem of neoliberalism, and how the multinational companies are actually drivers of this climate change. And injustice, there is injustice in this problem. And so I'm just curious on how can we build, how can we conceive a solidarity that is indigenous, that is rooted from our own conception as indigenous people, and how can we proceed from this discussion of apocalyptic state to a more hopeful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Eugene. How about you? I explain what the Pacific Peoples Partnership is.
So I am, or I was the president of the Pacific Peoples Partnership, and I'm still part of the board of directors of the Pacific Peoples Partnership. And what we do is we put a lot of people together in partnership to look at issues such as climate change, and to look at issues such as gender equality, and also looking at the issues that are faced within the Pacific region. And I think it's with these partnerships and advocacy within these partnerships and strengthening these ties that will help with what you're feeling. And you know, coming from, you know, Borneo is not that far away from the Philippines, and I know for sure there are partnerships there, and it is these conversations that we need to have between all these island states within the area in solidarity, because there are people who are talking about this and with passion to really resolve what's going on in that area. Because, you know, as you know, with the president of the Philippines right now, he is playing with the agenda, the neoliberal agenda, and it's very, very discouraging as to where that's going. And so there has to be conversations not only within the Philippines and within the area, but also within the areas that are affecting in the socio-economic and the judicial area, where it is so important to have that conversation, because as you mentioned, there is so much corruption in that area, and you really have to root that out for the peoples interest. And that in the end comes from grassroots advocacy and the partnerships that we build within those areas.
Yeah, and I would add, I don't know if that's visible. Maybe somebody could do a close-up on, there's two websites that I've put up here. One is for the Pacific Peoples Partnership.org. And Eugene and I are both members of the board of directors for PPP. And I've also put up another website there. It's the ICCA Consortium. And this ICCA is an abbreviation for Indigenous Peoples and Community Conserved Territories and Areas. The ICCA, I feel like just my forehead was sticking there for a minute. But the ICCA Consortium is a global movement of indigenous peoples and local communities that are working together in the exact fashion of which Eugene speaks of. They're not representative governments in the nation-state, the Westphalian nation-state system. They're local communities and indigenous peoples who are deeply rooted in place, who are working together at a variety of levels. I happen to know that there's a very strong, comparatively to other places, network of ICCAs in the Philippines. They do come to the table and share their experience. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Madagascar is another place where there's a strong national network. Iran, the indigenous nomadic peoples of Iran, with Sinesta, they represent over 700 indigenous nomadic tribes who work together, not to try to overthrow any governments or whatnot, but to create that solidarity and supporting one another in a variety of ways. The ICCA Consortium is just, in one way, it's in its infancy in North America. But in another way, it's very well developed because there's all kinds of indigenous-led initiatives and local community initiatives around self-determination. So we talk about dignity through self-determination, sustainable livelihoods, and environmental security. So the reason why we use that language in a very specific way is because we're not talking about economic development the way that a lot of people are used to thinking about it. We're talking about sustainable livelihoods. The human desire for self-determination plays out in our relationship to our traditional territories in the way that we provide for ourselves and the way that we provide for our children. And the language of environmental security is also very purposeful as it's linked to the concept of human security. And this idea of human security is an operative concept in international law, particularly around the responsibility to protect, and the responsibility to protect and promote human security, which is an accepted caveat on state sovereignty. And in this way, we're not talking about persecuting nation states in international tribunals. What we're talking about is the solidarity of indigenous peoples and local communities working to support the principles that our nation states have signed on to in the international community.
I believe Mikkel is part of that is part of ICCA, are you not?
Let me also just add on.
Please do.
On one more is the organization we're also part of is the 350.org. And there's so much amazing things that this organization is doing because it's grassroots level, it's an NGO, but that's also where we started from, to join the global movement. And there's so much good news in there also because right now we're working on the divestment campaign, and I think so far we have divested up to more than millions and millions of dollars from the fossil fuel companies. So look it up, and the Philippines have a strong leader there. She's a great leader. So you can look it up at the local level.
I think the 350.org is also having a climate stories event today. Right after this at 6:30 in Vancouver, they're doing Pacific stories about climate change. Yes. And so that's in Vancouver at 6:30.
Yeah.
In 45 minutes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the 350.org. And so, you know, I mean, I think there are a variety of organizations like this out there. You know, obviously we all vote with our dollars every time we make a purchase. The daily acts of, you know, solidarity that we can do. You know, we also need to look at stimulating alternative macroeconomic systems through indigenous nation to indigenous nation trade. There's various initiatives like this underway with the International Treaty Alliance, I think it's called. So there's a lot of these kinds of things that that we can do. Do you have any other questions from the World Wide Web? No. Any other? Okay, we have another question in the back, or comment.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this space. I am amazed by the technology and how we can be together from different parts of the world, and hearing you from Australia. And so I have a comment and a question. The comment is based on our brother from Samoa, Mikael. He was mentioning at the beginning, as I don't know if I understood properly, about one of the solutions today could be or is about learning from indigenous, because you hold the knowledge about that relationship with nature. And you made me think in my country, home country, Colombia, and the indigenous there, how they were managing the rivers, that there weren't floods. They knew how to. They were engineers, but of course we don't call them engineers because colonialism took that name. And anyways, I just want to encourage or to. I don't know, how can we promote more learning from indigenous technologies and knowledge? And this is just one example in Colombia, but also in Peru, Machu Picchu mountain is still up there because indigenous, more than 500 years ago, they knew how to manage the water coming down from the mountain and did a very developed underground system to manage water. And modern scientists today are rediscovering what 500 years ago they were doing with better ways that were sustainable. So how can we promote more of that knowledge, more of that technology that was already used more than 500 years ago that was erased by colonialism? And that's one question / comment. And the second one is there partnership with Latin American indigenous? Because coming from Latin America, knowing how oppressed our indigenous are there, and how oppressed, of course, it is still here, but compared to there, I know there is much higher oppression to indigenous communities. So is there some sort of solidarity or partnership with indigenous communities there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's two pieces in there. One about rediscovering and utilizing old knowledge systems to adapt to modern challenges. One thing that I would highlight in that conversation is a research project nationally here in Canada which is called Acting on Climate Change, Indigenous Innovations. And this is a research project with McGill University, the University of Victoria, Polis Project on Ecological Governance, the Assembly of First Nations, which represents 637 First Nations from across Canada, the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Sustainable Development Institute, and the Arctic Institute for Community-Based Research up north. So this, this national research initiative is about doing exactly what you're asking about. It's identifying from across Canada innovations that Indigenous peoples are bringing to bear in a modern context that is rooted in their traditional governance and economic practices. We're teaming up with the Montreal Science Centre, which is having a major exhibit this year to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Canada, and also the 375th anniversary of the City of Montreal. And so there's going to be a major exhibit which these Indigenous innovations are going to be showcased along with older technological innovations from Indigenous people here in North America or in Canada. On your note of the solidarity with Latin America, I would just say as kind of a caveat to my initial response is that the Indigenous populations here in Canada have been greatly reduced through systematic use of germ warfare. In my nation alone, we were reduced to 221 members in the early 1900s. And the people who were left alive were systematically institutionalized in residential schools and also in the Canadian justice system. Not to get stuck on the bad things, but our height of our civilizations were brought down to the brink of extinction. And in my community today, we only have a handful of fluent speakers left who still speak our language fluently. Our population's back on the rise. We're up over 1,000 members today. But I just wanted to provide that context that it is true that today the kind of brutality that's being brought to bear against Indigenous peoples in Latin America is certainly more overt, let's say. But that the barbarianism isn't gone here. If you remember the Picton farms and the multiple murders, the systematic murdering of Indigenous women in North America, all of these things are still here with us. And certainly we have a strong contingent within the ICCA consortium from Latin America, and we definitely want to continue to find more ways to create those coalitions. So thank you for asking that question, and I look forward to maybe providing my card. We could maybe see how we can connect with others in Latin America, and then what your studies are here at the University of Victoria if you're a student here. Yes? No? We have the 8-minute warning, so I had to count all your fingers there. But I'll hand it over to our panelists overseas there if you have any other thoughts on the question that was asked in terms of Indigenous innovations and then solidarity with Latin America. Who wants to grab it? Or did we mute you?
We muted them.
Okay, we're bringing you back online.
How can we learn from Indigenous communities? I think one of the conversation that comes into when we talk about climate change right now is climate justice. It's that we often talk about much, and that's something that I wish the world should learn more from traditional communities in terms of in terms of understanding the traditional governance and how they're managing and they're distributing wealth that limited wealth within the community to maintain peace. So those are simple things that's happening at a local level in terms of climate justice. But then I feel like it's really important to learn from those experiences because it's been working. The elders in the village are able to maintain the peace regardless of regardless of the impact of climate change that is affecting everybody. They're managing to share that limited land to each one that can make their gardens. They manage to allocate each one. Okay, you can move here to make your house. So they're doing that on the local level, and it's working for them. And I feel like we, as a global community, we need to allow the flow of information within, because right now it seems like it's a one-way traffic from the global north to the global south, but never from the global south to the global north. So it's just like it's a one-way traffic going that way. That all the learnings and the things you have to come from that. So if we allow for the mechanism, if there's a mechanism in place that can allow the global north to learn from the experience of the global south about how they're dealing with these issues, then it might help in some ways. And one of the classic examples is traditional knowledge in terms of understanding traditional governance, how they're dealing with those at the local level, and how you can get that into a broader perspective in replicating that idea in different culture or different societies that might able to use it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I do.
But also,
just brother, one more moment. We will pass it to you right away. But I want to know what happens when our time expires. Does the thing blow up? A little bit of bumper. Okay, we have some bumpers. So consider these our closing comments in response to the question. Go ahead, brother.
But it's also very simple. In our traditional knowledge is passed down to generation and generation. And for the person who asked the question, if you know about those traditional knowledge, write about it, keep it, pass it on through your network. You know, if you know that it's been working in South America and all those Latin America, and you know that for sure, pass it to your friends, pass it out to your family. It's very simple. If it's working for you, then you don't need a university to tell you it's working for you. Yeah. It's simple as that. Yeah. Just like back home. Yeah. Just like back home. Our traditional knowledge is passed down to our children and our grandchildren. And if it's working and they see it's working, then they will continue to live with the traditional knowledge, and they don't need any person to come and tell them, no, you have to actually do this and that. So it's simple. If you know it, keep it. Don't lose it, and write about it. Tell about it.
Yeah. Well, I think those are good closing thoughts. I don't know if you have. Yeah, it's hard to follow.
It's hard to follow.
You nailed it, brother. To the wall. Well, with that, I'd like to thank all of the panelists who've been here and the questions as well. So maybe a virtual round of applause and a big one. And I also have a note here that if anyone in the audience wants more, if you can't get enough of the online broadcasting, tune in to 350 Pacific. 350 Pacific. Live broadcast happening now. Thank you all again. Safe travels home, or, you know, get up and stretch your legs after sitting in front of the TV and the computer. I look forward to reconnecting with you all in the future. Kleko, kleko. Chew.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Good job,
folks. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Yeah, thank you, Selwyn. Thank you, Mikhail.
Thank you, Tomas.
Yeah, Faf Thailand, we will connect. We'll connect again. Hey, Vanuatu One Talk. We'll catch up again somewhere in the islands.
For sure.